If you're thinking about completing an IBMS registration training portfolio, but you haven't really been explained as to exactly what it is and how to complete it, then this video is for you. I'm going to go through the entire process of how it works and what's expected of you. Hi, my name's Abdul and I'm a fully qualified biomedical scientist working for the NHS in cellular pathology. So let's start off by first discussing what the IBMS actually is and why they are relevant for you. The IBMS stands for Institute of Biomedical Science. It's basically an organization that enforces professional standards that are set by other organizations. For example, the HCPC, which stands for Health and Care Professions Council. The IBMS are also the ones that give professional recognition to qualifications such as a biomed degree, as well as the registration training portfolio. And that's why it's relevant for you. The IBMS are also the ones that tell you if your degree is accredited or not, and are also responsible for evaluating your degree to see how many top-up modules you need to do to be eligible to become a biomedical scientist. Now, if you're not sure what I mean by top-up modules and accreditation versus non-accreditation, have a look at my previous videos. That will give you more information about what I'm talking about. So going back to the IBMS. So the IBMS are also responsible for giving you the certificate of competence, which you will get after completing your registration training portfolio. Now, what this certificate of competence allows you to do is to become registered with the HCPC, and then you can officially get the title of being a biomedical scientist. So let's talk about what the registration training portfolio actually is. The portfolio is basically you showing the IBMS that you're able to work as a biomedical scientist. It basically acts as a record of education and training in the workplace. And how you show them is by gathering evidence about all the things they want you to demonstrate. And these things are called standards of proficiency, or SOP for short. And these SOPs are set by the HCPC. Now be careful not to confuse this SOP abbreviation with the other SOP abbreviation, which stands for Standard Operating Procedure. So for the purpose of this video, when I say SOP, I mean Standards of Proficiency. Now these SOPs are listed throughout the entire portfolio. And these SOPs are what's going to guide you on what to write for your evidences. So the portfolio is split up into two sections. Section 1 is professional conduct. And this part is for you to demonstrate how you interact with other healthcare professionals and service users, as well as your overall fitness to practice. Section 2 is professional knowledge. And this section is for you to demonstrate you have the knowledge and skills needed to practice as a BMS. And in each section, there are 5 modules. So that gives a total 10 modules overall for the whole portfolio. Here's the list of all the modules that you need to write about to complete your registration training portfolio. Pause the video to have a look at all the topics you need to cover. And as you can see, each module has within them the relevant set of HCPC SOPs that they are looking for you to demonstrate. And these are the things that you need to cover within your evidence pieces. So for example, in section 1, module 1, personal responsibility and development, there are 12 SOPs that you need to cover within 3 evidences. So for example, one of the SOPs is 1.1. Identify the limits of their practice and when to seek advice or refer to another professional or service. Another SOP is 2.2. Promote and protect the service user's interests at all times. Now, some modules have more SOPs that you need to talk about and some have less. So I mentioned earlier that you'll need to produce evidence for each of the modules. So you'll need to produce 3 pieces of evidence for each module. So that means a total of 30 evidence pieces for the entire portfolio. So it's important to note that you don't need to write each evidence piece is geared towards each SOP. You can cover loads of the HCPC standards in just one evidence piece. I'll make a separate video about evidence ideas and formats that you could use. So if that interests you, then hit subscribe so you don't miss out. It's important to note that the evidence you gather has to be current. And this means that the evidence has to be within 3 years of the verification date. And I'll explain what verification means later on. So even though there is no time limit to actually complete the portfolio, the evidence that you gather has to be something that you've done in the last 3 years. Candidates typically take around 9 months to a year to complete the portfolio, so this generally isn't too much of an issue. Now, it's important to mention that the portfolio can only be completed in an IBMS pre-registration training approval lab. Now, what this means is that the IBMS have verified the lab to have in place approved training program with support and resources to ensure that they are adequate to properly train a trainee BMS or anyone undertaking the portfolio in general. You don't necessarily need to be a trainee BMS to do it. You can do it as an MLA or a support worker. You just have to be working for an IBMS approved lab. Going back to the portfolio itself, the actual portfolio is termed a generic portfolio. And this means that you can can complete this in any pathology discipline, whether it be in microbiology, cellular pathology, or blood sciences. It doesn't really matter. You all have to do the exact same portfolio with the exact same SOPs that you need to talk about. And the good thing about this is that you can move to any discipline you want after registration. So you aren't tied down to one speciality if you don't enjoy it. And if you really didn't enjoy it whilst doing your portfolio, you can move to another discipline in another lab, and you can pretty much pick up where you left off. You don't necessarily need to rewrite your evidences again from your previous lab, so long as your new lab are happy to sign it off, which they generally are. So now you've gotten to the stage where you've completed your portfolio and you've written about all the different ways of showing how much of a great scientist you are, and you've met all the SOPs that are set by the HCPC. Once your trainer is happy that you've met all the HCPC SOPs and you've completed your portfolio to a good standard, they will arrange a visit from an assessor that works for the IBMS. And this assessor will decide whether you've passed or not. And this part is called the verification process. So the assessor is typically someone outside your speciality. So for example, if you work in microbiology, your assessor will probably be someone that works for cellular pathology or hematology. And the whole point of this is so your assessor isn't overcritical or undercritical of how you perform. So as I mentioned before, the portfolio is a generic one and is relevant to all disciplines. So you're not going to be tested on any in-depth knowledge about any techniques. And instead, the focus is on meeting the minimum standards relevant to the scope of practice of a biomedical scientist in general. So don't worry too much about it on the day. Their job isn't to grill you. So as part of the verification, the assessor will either come into your lab in person or virtually. I personally did my verification over WhatsApp. Initially, you and your trainer will have a 15 to 20 minute meeting with your assessor, and your assessor will ask you general questions about the lab, what sort of lab it is, the routine work that you do, and the day-to-day workload that you have, as well as a little bit about your training program and how you found it. This meeting is only to set the scene of the process and to sort of ease your nerves a bit as well. So after the initial meeting, your assessor will get maximum of 90 minutes with your portfolio. So they're going to use this time to review your portfolio and your evidences and see whether you've met the HCPC standards of proficiency. And you don't need to be present for this part. The next part of the verification will involve you doing a lab tour, which will last around 40 minutes. Now, I know this sounds like a long time, but trust me, this part will go really quickly. The tour is for them to see how well you know your working environment, and you'll be asked questions regarding health and safety, quality, as well as training. You're expected to give an overview of the facilities, as well as the lab environment in general. You are also expected to articulate your knowledge about some of the procedures that you perform, as well as discuss some lab scenarios that your assessor will probably ask you questions about. The questions that they ask are probably just to clarify any areas that they thought were not very clearly explained in some of the evidence pieces that you may have. So this is your opportunity to show them that you are fit to practice as a BMS and to cover that SOP. So I mentioned earlier that they could come in virtually. So there are different ways of doing the tour. Like I said, I did mine over WhatsApp video call and I just showed them around the lab using my phone. There is another way that you can do it. You can prepare and present a PowerPoint presentation, and you can do this over Microsoft Teams and just explain some images on some slides. So after the lab tour, the assessor will take 5 to 10 minutes reviewing what they've seen and your portfolio. After they've reviewed that, they'll give you feedback, and it's at this point they'll let you know whether you've passed or not. And that's pretty much it. That is the whole process of the registration training portfolio in this simplified guide. If you found this video useful, let me know by hitting the like button. If not, hit the dislike button and let me know why in the comments. Make sure to join the Slack group with other biomedical scientists, trainees, and students to discuss more about this topic and share your experience. I'll leave a link to join in the description below. Thank you for watching and take care.